Hey there, this is Jake from the Chasing Quality podcast. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to talk to you about using Premiere Pro to color correct across different shots from multiple camera sources. This is a good way to be able to use multiple cameras, such as a DSLR mixed with a phone camera, and use color correction to get them a little bit closer so that they are more aesthetically pleasing to the eye. Let's head over to Premiere Pro. Okay, so here we are in Premiere Pro. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sample project using real clips from another project that I am currently filming. It's a long-term project. And I've got one clip that was filmed on my Panasonic GH5s and one that was filmed on my iPhone 12 Pro. I'll show you, this is the GH5s footage here in the top left quadrant, is the iPhone 12 footage. Now, part of the reason for the disparity is that the Panasonic GH5s was recorded using my Vlog-L profile, which is a very flat profile. iPhone 12 was not. But even once I correct the GH5s, you're going to still see a disparity. So what we're going to do is we're going to normalize between these two clips so that aesthetically, when somebody watches it, they don't really feel like they've been jarred going from one to the other. I'm going to go ahead and drag the Panasonic clip into there. And I'm going to go ahead and drag the iPhone clip into there. The iPhone clip is actually time-lapsed. I don't really need all of this clip from... I just need a little bit of clip from the GH5s for the sake of this little tutorial here. Okay. Now, one thing to note if you've not experienced this is the first clip that you drag into your timeline, that will determine the settings for your sequence, the resolution, the frame rate, all of that. So always be mindful of that when you're using different cameras, or if you're using different settings within the same camera. This GH5s clip was recorded at 1080p, while the phone footage, I believe, was actually at 3K. So because I dragged in the GH5s footage first, the overall sequence now is defaulted to 1080p. So I've got to go over to the iPhone footage and go up to Effect Controls, and I need to reduce the scale to about 60%. All right, so now they're full frame. All right, now what we're first going to do is we're first going to adjust and do the basic correction on the GH5s. Again, it's Vlog profile, so it's going to look very flat and very washed out. Two windows that you need to have, two panels, if you don't already have them showing, is you want to have Lumetri Scopes and you want to have Lumetri Color panel. To activate those, if you don't have them already activated, go up to Window in the menu bar and select Lumetri Color and select Lumetri Scopes. Once you've done that, you'll have this Lumetri Scopes panel, and on the right you'll have Lumetri Color. Once you've selected it, the Lumetri Scopes then are always going to be an option up there. If it's not the visible panel, then you'll click on these two double arrows and choose Lumetri Scopes. The Lumetri Scopes are what they do is they break out the red, green, and blue colors from the color profile, and they show the blacks will be at 0 and the whites will be at 100, and all shades of red, green, and blue in between will show up between those lines. So if you've got red kind of kissing that 100 line, that means you've got some red color somewhere that is at the max RGB value for red, which is generally 255. If you're using 10-bit, it's higher. You've got this circle here which shows the distribution of colors toward different color grades. So you get yellow, green, cyan, blue, magenta, and red here. There is a line that runs through here from the top left to the bottom right. That is meant to be the line for skin color, skin tones. And so if you've got... Now, when you've got a large frame like this, it's a little more difficult. But if you have a headshot, like a talking head, you're able to actually select out for just like say your hand or your face or whatever, and you generally want to have those colors kind of following this line here. You want to have this little cloudy, powdery thing along this line. Now, I don't know how that changes from different skin colors. I haven't played around with it enough. but that's what that line there is helpful for. Okay, and then here you've got all the colors combined. If you've got a scene that is, I don't know, has a lot of whites in it, you're going to want to see a lot of white here as the red, green, and blue mix because they're overlapping to create the whites in your image. This image here has a lot of different things, and it's got yellows and blues and oranges and greens and all sorts of other things. So you're going to have a lot of kind of craziness going on here. Again, because this is Vlog L profile, the first thing that I really need to do is I need to adjust the colors. I need to bring them back out. I need to basically decompress them. You can do this pretty easily and quickly under the Lumetri Color panel. That's where we're going to do all of our work. That's where we actually do all of our adjustments. The scopes just show what we're adjusting. If you go over the basic correction, you click on the input LUT. And you may not have this because I've imported this LUT. It comes from Panasonic as a correction to their Vlog L profile. It basically takes the Vlog L profile and converts it into the Rec 709. I also have, you'll see two others here. I got Film Kit Flat, which I was using for my Canon, and the Phantom Rec 709, which I think was supposed to actually help with drone footage. I'm not sure if it does. I can't remember where I got that from. But you've got some other ones here too. And if you've got, say, a Sony or a Canon or whatever, you get the C-Log, you can get the S-Log and all these other conversion tools to Rec 709. If I do that, it looks okay. You see the Lumetri scopes on the left, and you see that they've been expanded. Now the reds reach down a little bit beyond 10%. They reach up a little bit beyond 90%. However, I actually feel like there's a little bit too much red in this conversion. I don't know why, but there is. I'm actually going to go back and click none. I'm going to unselect it because you can do this manually too. It's a pain in the butt, honestly, doing it manually all the time. But I'm going to do it manually because I think that I'll probably get the superior color out of it that way. So again, with the cut selected, with the scopes up, and with our Lumetri Color panel, we'll just work our way down here. You can do the white balance selector. Click on this eyedropper. If you know something's white in the image, you can click on it. I know that this in my table saw, this blade guard is actually white, but it's maybe too blue. I don't know. I checked it and we'll see. And it's saying now that we need to adjust it negative 17.2. That may work. I'll go ahead and leave that. All that does is it only adjusts the temperature, doesn't adjust anything else. So the temperature is easy to reset. But for the colors, for the darkness and the brightness, we want to go down to the blacks, the whites, the shadows, and the highlights. The highlights are going to be like the somewhere between 50 and 75% or so. Shadows are about 50 to 25%. Blacks are 25% to 0, and whites are 75% to 100, roughly speaking. I'm not sure what the exact numbers are, but that's roughly where they're at. So you want, in your scopes, you generally, depending on what your image is, you generally want your blacks to just be kissing 0 and your whites to just be kissing 100. So let's go ahead and push them that way and see what that does. Push the blacks down, push the shadows down. We're going to take the highlights and push those up. And we're going to push the whites up. And then if you take your contrast and push that, it'll spread all of them. Spread all of them out. Push your blacks down a little further. Shadows down a little further. Highlights up a little more. Whites up a little more. That's actually looking, in my opinion, actually pretty good. And I may adjust the exposure just a little bit there. Yeah, so very nice. That's okay with me. Now, if we'd used the input LUT, it would have achieved close to the same thing. Again, I felt like it was a little too red from that, what it was converting to. I know what my shop looks like. And to me, this is closer to what it looks like than what that default LUT was showing me. However, when you use the LUT, it leaves all of these at 0 and kind of works in the background. It does a conversion first, and then you use these to do mild adjustments. So you have more adjustment opportunities when you use that LUT, because once you've gone all the way black and all the way white, there's you can't adjust those any further, but you get a lot more range from using the input LUT. So, but to me, I think this is pretty close to what I want.
Blocks.
So we'll go ahead
We're going to start with the front ones first.
I think to people watching this, they would be able to, clearly see what's going on. There's nothing that's blown out. There's nothing that's too dark. All the shadows are, kind of nicely done. Yeah, so that to me is close enough for the purpose of this project. Now let's go over to our iPhone footage. So if I click between them, I can see their differences, but that's kind of a challenge to have to go back and forth, and that's really where the comparison view is awesome. Comparison view in Premiere Pro is pretty cool. It it allows us to see these side by side, and in your toolbar underneath your preview panel, there's a button, an icon that is they look like two little film strips, and it says comparison view if you hover over it. If you do not have this button, go over to your plus on that toolbar, and it is going to be, why am I not seeing? Okay, it's right here, comparison view. If you just click on that icon, you drag it down into your toolbar, it will give you that button. So I already have it. I'm going to click on it, and now it normally will default. I've already played around with this. It will default to side-by-side view. And to set this up, the left frame is your reference frame. The right frame is your current frame. By reference, this allows you to choose anywhere in the timeline whatever frame you want. And the current frame is going to be set by where your scrub line, your actual time set down in your timeline. So we're going to set that to iPhone. We want that to be the current one, i.e. the one that we're actually working on. And that's pretty good. And then the reference one, we're going to set that maybe right there. When we go to vertical split, which is my preferred method, it takes us very close. It gets us very close, and you can actually move this to show one frame more prominently than the other. If you set this up correctly, you can get two objects. In this case, it's going to be me, very close to each other, so that you can really kind of dial in those colors up close. So now I can see my overalls here on the left, my overalls here on the right, shirt, etc., etc. And I can even see a little bit of the walnut wood here and here. Now I can make careful adjustments to the iPhone footage and be very close to the reference frame to adjust them. So, or I can even like pull it all the way back. Now I can actually see my this is my planer over here and see the oranges in it. The oranges are close, but a little bit off. So let's start adjusting this. One other thing I should note too in the scopes, if you look at the scopes as I drag this line back and forth, you see how the scopes change. That's because the scopes are showing us what is in this combined frame. And that's cool because now you can see if you cut this in half, the red's in half, this left half is from our GH5s and the right half is from our iPhone. The left half is from the GH5s, right half is from the iPhone. That's really helpful because this will also show you the contrast. So these are the same spot in the shop, or not the same spot. I mean, it's a different angle, but they're the same scene roughly. And what we're seeing in the scopes is we're seeing that the iPhone footage is probably a little more contrasty because those colors are spread out much farther. So that's maybe one area that we can touch on is the contrast. We may need to adjust the white balance and things like that too. So I'm going to open up this one a little bit more first. And I also want to show you in the scopes here now that we've got this iPhone footage taking up most of the scopes. If you look at the red, the top of the red, green, and blue, there's like a little line here. That line is the window. Because again, we're working from the left of the frame to the right of the frame. So this spot in the frame is what represents this little line here. And that's basically showing that it's been blown out. Anytime you have some sort of fine geometry, like a fine line, like a line or a box or something like that in your scope, it means that you probably have a blowout or you have something, the clipping to the whites or clipping to the blacks. And it means that you were overexposed or underexposed. So what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to bring the whites down a bit, and I'll bring the highlights down a bit because I already know that all of those things were clipping. They were all too high. And let me move this back over here. What I might do is I might actually reduce the contrast, the overall contrast of it as well. And actually, just by reducing the contrast, if you see now, gosh, that's really close. Just by reducing the contrast in the iPhone footage, I would say left and right. Now I'm personally starting to have trouble telling the difference, knowing which one is which. I know that the GH5s gives me a slightly better depth of field. It's a slightly smoother image. It's not as sharp is the word that they use for an iPhone or for a phone camera, but I don't really like the word sharp. But there is now it's much closer. And you see that on the scopes too. You see that the scopes are a little closer. I'm actually going to increase the contrast a little bit more on the iPhone, and I'm going to go back and decrease the contrast. Wait, no. Increase the contrast. The GH5s. I don't think I like that actually. I'm going to decrease that to about 60. And then that's really, in my opinion, that is really, really damn close. Let me play with the white balance in. Okay, so we can probably warm it up a little bit. That's too warm, but maybe if we go with like a 6, 5 or 6, 7. What is it? 7 right now. Let's go back to our other one. Maybe bring it up a little bit. Wow, that, in my opinion, look at the oranges. So the orange in the planar in the iPhone image, the colors are a little bit off, but that color is off because of all this light pouring in the window. If you subtract this light out and imagine what it would look like without that light shining there and blowing it out, these are pretty close. The yellow in this is a I don't know if you call it like a push paddle or whatever, this yellow thing here. If you look at the yellow there and compare it to the yellow in this DeWalt drill, those are pretty close. And that I know in real life those yellows are the same. If you look at the blue in the handle here on this jig and the blue here, those are pretty close. Now I can probably adjust those ever so slightly. I do feel like those blues are a little bit off. And I can do that maybe by, let's see, that's too blue. Maybe there. Reduce this down a little bit. There's I'm gonna have to do some other blue adjustment, and I'm gonna have to mess with the curves a little bit in this cut. But we are really, really close, I think, for now. So let's explore. Let's go ahead and explore some of the other things that are offered in the Lumetri Color panel. So this is basic correction and saturation. Sometimes I'll desaturate the iPhone footage. Sometimes I feel like iPhones, drones, any small cameras overly saturate the image compared to my GH5, GH5s. That's just like if you see, I click on that saturation and it just gets really kind of nasty. And so if I bring it down actually to 91, that actually got those blues a lot closer too. Anyway, so you've got the basic correction. And then we've got the creative panel. I'll talk a little bit more about creative panel when we work on an adjustment layer next. But in creative for look, that's your lookup table that allows you to do color grading. And we'll talk about color grading in a second. Intensity is just the intensity of it. Faded film allows you just to kind of create this faded film look. I don't really generally ever use that, but you may want that. Sharpen, you can see that it's going to, if you look at the right frame, it's increasing the sharpness and decreasing it. I usually leave that the same. Although sometimes adjusting the sharpness between, say, like a mirrorless camera or DSLR and a camera phone is actually helpful. A lot of times these phone cameras are overly sharp. And so if you just drop the sharpness a little bit, it may actually be a closer image to the other one. I'm not going to do that though. Vibrance is, it will adjust. It's kind of like saturation, except it doesn't adjust. It doesn't mess with the skin tones as much. And then saturation is just the intensity really of the hue for the colors. And then tint balance. Tint balance is if you can do a shadow tint and you can move this over to say blue, and now all of a sudden it's bluish. And then you can shift the tint balance a little bit between highlights and shadows. A lot of people will use this, I believe, for getting kind of more of an orange and blue kind of color scheme. I don't really mess with it much. And then, okay, so then we close that. Let's go to curves. Curves allow you to adjust the overall white or the individual red, green, and blue. It shows you a line here from lower left to top right. So lower left is the blackest of the whites, and the top right is the brightest of the whites. And you can adjust it by clicking on this little square there. You can adjust this up. You can do the same with the whites. Move it over, move it down, or you can create new keys in between and drag those. And I will use this for fine adjustment if I have to. I generally don't do the whites too much. What I usually will do is I'll usually use the individual colors because I'll feel like maybe there's a discrepancy between one frame and the other, and I need to take a little bit of blue out or add a little bit of red in. In this case, I do feel like a little bit of blue maybe needs to be added in. And let's go to the iPhone footage. I'm not quite sure where. I'm guessing it's like somewhere in the mid range, and you can click the dot there, and I can bring it up. Although that's adding way too much blue. I maybe actually want to only bring it up. Let's see, bring it down there. Yeah, I don't know if that necessarily helped. I feel like it added too much blue in. I feel like there's too much blue. So I'm just going to double click on it to reset it. And I'm probably going to leave it as is and just say, okay, this is pretty darn close. I'm happy with that. But that's what the curves are. The curves, let's go back to the red, and I'll show you the red. And I can just, if I pull it down like this, it basically is pulling the reds out of, most intensely out of the mid, the mid range. But it also will, it's kind of like this curve, this Bezier curve. It will take them out of the highlights and the shadows as well. If you don't want it out of the highlights and shadows, you can create another point there, create another point here. And now what it's doing is it's pulling the reds out right out of the middle, putting it right back in the middle there, right? So I don't know if there's any reason to really mess with the reds. I think it looks better without that. All right, so that's curves. Then you have your hue saturation curves, the hue versus saturation, hue versus hue. This allows you to choose a color along the line and adjust the saturation of the individual color. And you can use an eyedropper for this. So let's say we want to just adjust. Let's just try to adjust. Oops. Let's just try to adjust the blue here. Right there. And once I clicked on it using the eyedropper, now you see 3 dots, and it's saying that color is ranging from here on the left to here on the right. And you can take this middle one then, and you can drag it up and increase the saturation intensity of just that color. Now you see how, if you look at the handle of this clamp here, it's now pretty intensely blue. I went overboard. Now let's take it all the way down, and now it's almost gray. This is where I can really adjust that blue, and that actually is very close now. That's a lot closer to, that's maybe the one we wanted. Maybe not so intensely. That's done a pretty good job of adjusting the intensity of that. That's really, honestly, a little bit extreme. I normally am not going to need to go to that length to make those adjustments because most people aren't going to notice that, so long as I get the overall image pretty close. But this is good if you've got like a consistent scene and you really want to have one thing punch really, really hard. This is a good way to do it. Let's try it also with our planer here. I'll click on the planer. And let's move the planer up. You see how bright orange it is now over here in the right scene? Now you have to be careful because it didn't just increase the orange in the planer, it also increased the orange in my overalls. It probably added a little bit orange to the bench top here. So let's take it down, and now it's grayed out. Now you can see, of course, my overalls are all grayed out too. So I'm going to double click on all of that, and I'm actually going to go just back. I did like what it did to the blue though, so I'm going to desaturate that just a little bit. Okay. And then you have hue versus hue, and that's just you're changing the hue from one color to the other. Hue versus luma is the amount of light that is in that color. All right, so and then we have luma versus sat. Luma versus sat is luminance versus saturation, or luminosity versus saturation. So this allows you to make your blacks blacker and your whites whiter. And I say that because it's just like say like a white T-shirt that you've run through the laundry. Over time, it may start to pick up color bleed from your other shirts, maybe a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, or whatever. And that's going to happen too if you're overly correcting your image. I don't know if we really have any in this frame here. We do have it in. Let's go back to our other frame. I'm going to choose our reference frame here. Okay, so I've moved this bar over, and I've selected the reference frame from GH5s. Let's mess with this and see what it does. Let's we get the luminance versus saturation. You can click there, and you can do all sorts of things, right? It's black on the left to white on the right, and so darkest to brightest, and you click and create dots along the way. Create these points, and you can basically remove or add saturation to those points. Let's do it first in the middle to show you what it would look like in the middle. Okay, so you see how much punchier it gets. I'm dragging up. These colors that are like kind of rest in the middle of the light spectrum, they're getting all saturated, I guess is the word, right? But people will use this when they've applied a look and they don't want their blacks to appear reddish with a reddish hue or their whites to appear with anything else. And you can drag this down or up to remove any hues that may appear in the blacks or the whites. And I don't think this scene really has much that is going to change from that. I don't really see, saturation in those areas because we don't have a lot of darks. But if I were using like an interview image and that interview had like a dark backdrop, this would be very helpful for that. I don't think we're going to get any out of this other one either. But let's try it in our other image here. Yeah, that doesn't really do much either. But you can play around with it. That allows you to kind of create more of a washed out black and white-ish image. I'm not going to mess with it though. I don't think it's really helping in this case. So we'll leave that. And saturation versus saturation, it's just going to be the amount of saturation for a certain saturation amount. I don't mess with that one. Okay, this hue and saturation curves. Next, let's look at, so those are curves overall. Color wheels and match. I don't do this very often, but there is a face detection option in here, and you can do the comparison view, and you can match the colors between scenes. And let's apply the match. I don't know if that actually did anything. It may already be pretty close. Oh, there it went. Okay, so I applied the match there, and now it thinks that these scenes are pretty close. I actually feel like it changed a little more than I wanted. But that's another way to do it. I personally would not use that when I've got different cameras and different camera angles with those different cameras, only because the differences are going to be pretty pronounced. So I'm going to undo that if I can. There we go. I don't really like what it did to that. But with these color wheels, you can adjust the shadows, the tints and the shadows. So like, let's go to super blue here. Let's go up to orange there, maybe a big green there. So you can adjust the tint to the highlights and the shadows and the midtones. And it's really after doing something like this that you'd want to go back to that hue versus luminance and adjust the brightness of those hues. But I'm going to reset all these. Okay, and next one's HSL Secondary. HSL Secondary is really cool. It's really cool for adjusting skin tones, and it's cool if you've got maybe we want to change the color of my shirt. This is something that you can use to do that. Under HSL Secondary, if you choose the set color eyedropper and you let's choose my shirt here. Now we don't know quite what it selected. It shows us the color range that's selected here in these bars. But if we click on next to color gray, if we click on the checkbox, it will now show us, it'll mask it out. It'll mask out everything that's not what we want. And so now we have my shirt there. We see that some of the shadows of the shirt aren't being picked up, so we can adjust that a little bit by bring in a little bit more of the shirt there. That's actually looking pretty good. I'm not sure what else. You have to be careful though, because it's going to pick up other things in your scene. I mean, we really want just the shirt. It's okay if you get a little bit more, but we really just want the shirt. Yeah, see if we adjust this, it starts pulling in the wood and stuff too. We don't want that. We just want the shirt. All right, now we have the shirt selected. Let's take off that preview. And now, I don't know, what color do we want the shirt to be? Let's say we want it green. Let's say we want it blue or purple. Now you can only go so far with this, but that's kind of cool. We can turn the shirt pink. Now you're not going to usually be that extreme about how much you're changing. You're normally going to make a very subtle change, right? So just a subtle change here over to yellow makes that shirt a little more brown. Subtle bit of red makes it a little more red. Get a little more blue. So you want subtle changes, not extreme changes. Let's say maybe we don't actually want to correct the color of it. Maybe we just want to adjust the temperature of it. That turns it to, all sorts of other colors. Contrast, you can make it more contrasty, and you can sharpen it or unsharpen it, and you can adjust the saturation of it. So that's pretty cool. I don't use blur or denoise, but that can be helpful if you want to actually blur the shirt out for whatever reason. Now that shirt appears much blurrier, which I don't really think is all that cool, but you can do that. Okay, so that's enough with the HSL Secondary. We're going to remove that. And Vignette. Vignetting is usually at the corners of an image when you have a lens. It's usually from the lens or something else. It will cause either bright corners or dark corners, and you can use this to adjust that. I actually like to add a little bit of darkness into the color sometimes, into the corners sometimes, because that's usually not what I'm focusing on. I'm trying to focus the attention somewhere else, and so reducing that, reducing the brightness of the corners by taking this vignette amount to the negative area, in my opinion, can be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing at times. You can go the opposite end and add brightness. Maybe you want it to look like a dream scene. And midpoint's going to shift around where that midpoint of it is. Roundness is going to make it more square or more round. And feathering is going to be, if you remove all feathering, it's just this very sharp circle. And I generally leave the feathering as is. I almost generally leave all of these as is and just change the amount. I'm not going to do it in this case because I don't really feel like I need to vignette. All right, so that is essentially most of the Lumetri Color panel. Play around with it and see what you like. You can only learn so much from watching a video on Lumetri. You really need to experience it for yourself and what is affected by dragging things around. Now that I've got these pretty close, or at least close enough to where I am happy with the difference between the left and right images, I would say that I'm done with the comparison. I'm done with the normalization between the two frames. Now, if I want to apply a look to my overall film, I can use an adjustment layer. And you can create an adjustment layer by going to your project panel and right-clicking, selecting New Item, clicking on Adjustment Layer. This is, you can change the width or the height of it. If you leave it, it's going to default to whatever your sequence settings are, and that's most of the time what you're going to want. So I'm just going to hit OK. I now have an adjustment layer, and you see that it's 5 seconds long. It's just black. I can pull that over here, drag that into my timeline, and extend it out across my clips. If you are not experienced with Premiere Pro, one thing to note is that for the video tracks, the V1 is always going to be the base track. Anything that you put on V2, V3, V4, and so on, those are going to basically be overlaid over top of the tracks below them. So you want to put the adjustment layer above what you want it to affect. Now, if we wanted the adjustment layer to only affect, say, the GH5s footage, we could drag the iPhone footage up above it. And now it's when we change the adjustment layer, it's not going to adjust. It's not going to change the iPhone footage. But in this case, we have the iPhone footage and the GH5s footage pretty close. We're pretty happy with that. So adjustment layer, again, it starts off, it's just a blank slate. There are no qualities to it right now. But if we select it and we have our Lumetri Color panel up, we can now adjust the Lumetri Color for it just like we can adjust anything else, and it will start to impart those qualities to the other two clips in our sequence. And it will do it at the same time. So let's go ahead and adjust the white balance. Whoa, see now it took both frames and made them blue or orange. We can change the exposure, the overall exposure. We don't really probably want to do that. Maybe 1 is okay, but we don't really like that. We can change the saturation and so on. But we're pretty happy for the most part with where we're at with the correction. So if we want to apply a look, if we want to apply a LUT, a lookup table, we can go to the creative section of Lumetri Color, and we can go to the Look drop-down menu. And Premiere Pro comes preloaded with, I would say that's probably about 30 or so LUTs. And I actually find these LUTs to be sufficient. There are a lot of YouTubers who are selling their LUTs. They're big name YouTubers who are popular for making videos about how to make videos. And they have all these looks, and people maybe find them attractive, and they think, oh, if I buy my LUT, my video will look like theirs. Well, in truth, there's a lot more work to make your video look like theirs than simply applying a LUT. So my recommendation would be to simply start off with using these LUTs from within Premiere Pro and adjusting those or making your own to get the look that you want, because you have to start off with a certain base image with a certain color palette on which you apply that LUT in order to achieve the same outcome. So I would just start off using these. I often prefer using this first one here, or it's actually the second one, the Fuji Eterna 2250D, for a lot of my. It would be for anything where I've actually got like humans who are interacting in maybe more of a, I don't know if you call it a fictional way. I'm not sure if I call it a fictional short film, but I like the look of it. It kind of gives an older, like an old Western feel to it, or I don't know, something classy to it. I like that look. But if you don't like the intensity of it, how much it changed it, let's turn it off and on, off and on. You can adjust the intensity of it. There's a slider here that if we adjust it down to 0, it means that it's not applying it at all. If we adjust it up to 200, it's like, over applying it to the whole image. So 100 is, in my opinion, pretty good. Let's try another one. Let's try bleach. Bleach is meant to kind of like represent like a beach scene or something that's washed out in the desert, and we can make it super intense. And now you're like, oh my gosh, this kind of looks like I'm doing this in broad daylight, at high noon. That's bleach. And you've got some noir ones here. Oops, that's not noir. That's NDR. Noir HDR. There we go. You film for film noir if you want to go with a black and white. But you can achieve all of these looks the same way by just adjusting your sliders and your curves and all that stuff. But it's only going to fix it so much. You have to start off with a certain color scheme in order to get a certain output. It's day to night. Day to night's kind of cool if you want to make it look like it's nighttime in the shop. I'm not going to apply for something like this, a tutorial in the shop, where I really just want to highlight. I want people to be able to see what I'm doing. I want maximum brightness, or I don't want shadows to be very dark. I want people to see it. I'm probably not going to apply a look, but that's where you apply a LUT, and you apply it to this adjustment layer. And now with the adjustment layer, you can do the vignetting in the adjustment layer instead of doing it in the individual clips. That's probably advisable. Anything that you want applied to your entire movie, you're going to want to apply through an adjustment layer, or multiple adjustment layers for that matter. You're not going to want to apply them individually. My recommendation is to color correct each clip to where it's, to where that clip is like your standard color palette, and then apply an overall adjustment layer. And you're going to probably thank yourself for that, because if you decide at the end, I don't like the look of what I just produced, you can either adjust that, you can either delete the adjustment layer or just simply adjust the adjustment layer. You do not want to have to go back and recolor grade 50, 60, maybe 200 separate, clips. Okay, well, I think that's it for Lumetri Color and correcting between cuts. I think this is probably a little more comprehensive than I planned, but I hope that it helped. I hope you found that useful. If you haven't checked out our podcast, please do. Chasing Quality Podcast. You can
Find us on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, any major podcasting platform, or you can go straight to our website, chasingquality.transistor.fm. Until next time, keep chasing that quality. You know I will.